Imagine, if you will, the following scenario. It's 2:00 a.m.
The classic time for this sort of thing.
Right, exactly. You are sitting in a dark room, and the glow of multiple monitors is just washing over your face. You've just spent the last, I don't know, 3 weeks meticulously infiltrating a massive corporate network.
Which is exhausting work, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. So you've bypassed their next-generation firewalls, you've slipped past their intrusion detection systems like an absolute ghost, and you've just successfully extracted a payload of highly sensitive, encrypted financial data.
The holy grail.
Yeah, your heart is pounding, your adrenaline is spiking. Now, in one reality, about 10 seconds from now, a SWAT team kicks down your front door. Federal agents confiscate every single piece of electronics you own, and you are staring down the barrel of decades in federal prison.
A very grim reality.
But in another reality, the sun comes up, you put on a sharp suit, you walk into a boardroom, and the CEO of that very same company shakes your hand and slides a massive six-figure paycheck across the table to you.
Yeah, quite the contrast.
Right. And the difference between those two realities, it isn't the technical skills, it isn't, the software you used. The only difference between being a convicted felon and a highly paid industry consultant is a single piece of paper.
A legally binding contract.
Exactly. That razor-thin line is exactly why we are here today. Navigating that legal and ethical boundary is literally a matter of absolute career survival.
It really is. It's make or break.
So if you are building a future in this industry, make sure you hit subscribe and share this deep dive with your peers so you never miss the insider strategies that could, quite frankly, literally save your career one day. We also drop links in the description below to resources you will absolutely want to bookmark.
You'll definitely want to check those out.
Yeah.
Because, that piece of paper is the ultimate defining line. It is the barrier between a celebrated career and complete ruin.
Yeah, because the keystrokes are the same.
Exactly. The actions, the keystrokes, the methodologies, they are identical. And yet the context changes everything. So today, we were taking on a massive undertaking. Operating as independent industry analysts, we are kicking off the first of 14 comprehensive deep dives based on a really foundational text.
Right. Hands-on Ethical Hacking and Network Defense, 4th edition.
Yeah. Published in 2022 by Wilson, Simpson, and Antill.
And we are tailoring this specific series as an external resource for students currently enrolled in Dr. Schuessler's Ethical Hacking and Cybersecurity Operations course.
Which is a fantastic program.
It really is. And this is also for, early career professionals in MIS, CIS, and IT. Looking at how this specific academic program is structured, the mission here is to really bridge the gap between the academic curriculum, like the theory you learn in a lecture hall, and the unforgiving real-world demands of the tech sector.
Because that transition from the classroom to the corporate network is where a lot of young professionals stumble.
Right. They know the tech, but not the environment.
Exactly. They misjudge the environment entirely. But Dr. Schuessler's course is designed to prevent that exact stumble. So today's focus is Chapter 1, Ethical Hacking Overview.
Getting right into the basics.
Yeah. We're setting the stage by defining what an ethical hacker actually is, what the daily operational realities look like, and, most importantly, the rigid legal frameworks that govern every single keystroke.
Which brings us to a fundamental problem of terminology, I think. Because pop culture has completely distorted our vocabulary.
Oh, completely. Movies and TV have ruined the term.
Right. So the text establishes some very specific labels: hackers, crackers, and script kiddies. But from a legal perspective, these distinctions get really murky really fast.
Very fast.
If we look at the U.S. Department of Justice standards, their definition of a hacker is incredibly broad. The DOJ basically labels a hacker as anyone who accesses a computer system or network without the authorization of the system's owner.
There's zero nuance there.
Right. It is an illegal act carrying severe prison time. There is no nuance about intent in their baseline definition whatsoever.
Because the law focuses squarely on authorization. Period. But within the cybersecurity industry itself, intent is the defining characteristic.
Okay, so how does the industry define it?
Well, the industry uses the term cracker to specify a threat actor who breaks into systems specifically to steal, corrupt, or destroy data. It carries an inherently malicious connotation.
Like a safecracker.
Exactly like that. Conversely, an ethical hacker, or a penetration tester or a security tester, performs almost the exact same activities a malicious actor does.
They use the same tools, right?
Oh, yeah. They run the same discovery scans. They utilize the exact same exploits. They actively try to break the architecture.
But wait, if the Department of Justice explicitly labels all unauthorized access as hacking. Is the term ethical hacker actually an oxymoron? I mean, how do you legally perform an illegal action?
Well, that is the core tension that security professionals live with every single day. The ethics aren't embedded in the tools you use, right? A
Mm.
piece of code doesn't have morals. The ethics are entirely located in the consent you receive.
Okay. The contract.
Yes. You bypass the DOJ's definition of criminality by obtaining explicit, documented permission from the system's owner before you ever even touch a keyboard. You become an authorized agent stress testing the network.
That makes sense. And even within that authorized realm, the scope of what you were actually hired to do varies wildly, right? The industry breaks assessments down into three distinct types: vulnerability assessments, penetration tests, and security tests.
Those are the big three, yeah.
So if a chief information officer is trying to figure out what they actually need to allocate budget for, how do these differ mechanically, like on a day-to-day level?
Think of it in terms of depth and active exploitation. A vulnerability assessment is fundamentally just an enumeration exercise.
Like making a list.
Exactly. The tester attempts to catalog all the known vulnerabilities found in an application or on a system. They are scanning for outdated software versions, missing patches, maybe misconfigured firewalls, but they stop there.
So they don't actually hack anything.
Right. They report the open doors, but they do not walk through them.
They just hand the CIO a massive list of theoretical weaknesses.
Correct. Now, a penetration test takes that critical next step. It is the active attempt to exploit those vulnerabilities to see how deep into the network an attacker could actually get.
So you're actually walking through the open door now.
Yeah, you aren't just listing the unlocked doors. You are walking through one, finding the internal elevator, and seeing if you can access the executive suite before the security team even notices you're in the building. It proves the actual impact of a theoretical vulnerability.
Oh, wow. And then a security test broadens the scope even further than that.
Significantly further, a security test evaluates the company's entire security posture. Testers attempt to break in, yes, but they also analyze the organization's policies, procedures, and the human elements.
Like social engineering.
Exactly. They review incident response protocols, evaluate the physical security of the premises, and assess whether employees will fall for a phishing email or let someone tailgate them through a secure door. Management needs to understand these mechanical differences so they aren't, paying for a massive month-long security test when they simply needed a localized vulnerability scan to satisfy some quarterly compliance checklist.
Right, that would be a huge waste of money. And that level of sophistication is exactly what separates professionals from the derogatory term the industry uses for inexperienced attackers, which is script kiddies.
Or sometimes packet monkeys.
Right, packet monkeys. These are individuals who leverage pre-written code scripts written in Python, Ruby, Perl, or C, or they use these automated GUI tools created by actual knowledgeable programmers. But the script kiddies possess zero understanding of the underlying mechanics.
And it is a massive issue in the modern threat landscape. A script kiddie downloading an automated exploitation framework is incredibly dangerous, precisely because they don't understand what the code is doing to the target's memory or the network stack.
I always look at it this way. A script kiddie using an automated SQL ingestion tool is like someone driving an automatic car who has absolutely no concept of how a transmission actually works.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. As long as they are on a nicely paved road, they can push the gas pedal and move forward. But the second that car gets stuck in the mud, which in our world is like a properly configured web application firewall blocking their automated payloads, they are completely helpless.
Yeah, they don't know what to do.
They just press the gas pedal harder, spinning the tires and creating massive amounts of noise in the server logs. An ethical hacker, however, understands the mechanics. They know how to get out of the car, check the traction, and manually shift gears.
They adapt.
Exactly. They can rewrite the payload in C to manipulate memory allocation directly, completely bypassing the firewall's signature detection.
That analogy hits the mark perfectly because it really highlights the necessity of foundational knowledge.
Yeah.
If you don't understand how data is allocated in the system's memory, you cannot adapt when a prepackaged exploit inevitably fails.
And they always fail eventually.
Always. This puts immense pressure on students entering this field, like those in Dr. Schuessler's program. You are defending against an absolute army of unskilled actors who are wielding highly sophisticated automated weapons.
Which is terrifying.
It is.
Yeah.
The sheer volume of automated attacks has skyrocketed, meaning defenders must possess a really deep structural understanding of network mechanics just to filter the noise from the truly sophisticated threats.
Which brings us to the concept of hacktivists. The book defines them as individuals who hack computer systems for political or social reasons.
Yeah, and from an independent analytical perspective, it is vital to view hacktivism objectively. A hacktivist's motivations are ideological rather than purely financial.
Right, they aren't necessarily looking for a payday.
Exactly. But from a purely operational network defense standpoint, the motivation is largely irrelevant to the mechanics of the defense. A breached network is a breached network.
It doesn't matter why they did it.
Exactly. The ethical hacker's mandate is to secure the architecture against unauthorized access, regardless of whether the threat actor intends to quietly siphon off credit card numbers or loudly deface the corporate homepage to make a political statement. The mechanics of the exploit often look totally identical.
So let's translate these concepts into a daily operational reality. We've defined the roles, but what does the actual playbook look like? I mean, what is a penetration tester doing on a random Tuesday morning?
The daily routine is really rigorous and methodical. You are performing active discovery and scanning for open ports across internet-facing assets, internal intranets, maybe wireless environments.
Just looking for a way in.
Right. You are researching and applying appropriate exploits. You are manually reviewing application source code to find those hidden zero-day vulnerabilities that the automated scanners just miss. And perhaps most critically, you are writing detailed reports and debriefing clients.
Because you can't just be a technical savant in a basement. You have to be able to translate complex memory corruption vulnerabilities into a business risk model that a board of directors can actually understand.
Communication is absolutely the great filter in this industry. If you find a critical flaw but cannot clearly articulate the financial and operational risk to a non-technical executive, your technical skills are essentially useless to the business.
Yeah, they won't fix it if they don't understand it.
Exactly. This is why academic programs that emphasize technical writing right alongside practical labs are so incredibly vital. It is also why modern assessments are rarely solitary endeavors anymore. The industry relies heavily on the red team concept.
The red team, a concept pulled directly from military wargaming.
Yes. A modern corporate network is simply too complex for any single individual to master every single attack vector. A red team is a diverse group of highly specialized operators.
Everyone has a role.
Right. One team member might be an absolute savant at reverse engineering malware. Another might focus exclusively on wireless network cracking, intercepting radio frequencies.
Or physical security.
Exactly. Another might specialize entirely in physical security testing, whether they can socially engineer a receptionist or clone an employee's RFID badge to walk straight into the secure server room.
Which leads us directly into how these red team engagements are structured, specifically what the industry calls the box models: white box, black box, and gray box. Let's look at the white box model first because it's interesting. In a white box test, there is full transparency. The tester is given the network topology, the technology stack, and often the literal architectural floor plans of the building.
Yeah, they get everything.
Furthermore, the tester is permitted to interview the company's IT personnel.
The textbook provides a brilliant illustration of why this matters with Figure 1.1, which is a sample physical floor plan. It shows a layout featuring a lobby, conference rooms, a server wire and phone equipment room located right next to a network administrator's office, and critically, a sprawling production and shipping area with data collection terminals scattered throughout.
Okay, I have to push back here, though. Cybersecurity is about digital defense, right? If I'm hired to hack a database, why do I care about a physical map of a shipping department? Doesn't giving the tester the literal blueprints and letting them interview the IT director completely defeat the purpose of mimicking a real-world cyber attack?
I get that question a lot.
I mean, a hostile nation-state isn't going to get a guided tour of the facility before they launch a ransomware campaign. Doesn't the white box model just cheat the simulation?
It is a really common misconception, but it misunderstands the metric of success for a white box test. You are absolutely right that a real attacker starts completely blind. But a real attacker also has unlimited time.
Oh, that's true. They can wait months.
Right. An advanced persistent threat group might spend 2 years silently probing an external perimeter, mapping subdomains, and just waiting for one employee to make a mistake. A consulting firm does not have 2 years. They have a 2-week contract. A white box test is about maximizing efficiency and cost effectiveness.
So you are basically skipping the reconnaissance phase to focus on the deep structural flaws.
Exactly. By providing the blueprints, the company allows the red team to bypass weeks of blind discovery, Look back at that floor plan from Figure 1.1. The server room is next to the admin office. That's highly secure. But those data collection terminals out in the open shipping bay,
Anyone could walk up to them.
right, that is a massive structural vulnerability. A white box tester sees that immediately. They know that instead of trying to brute force a firewall from the outside for a week, an attacker could simply dress up as delivery driver, walk right onto the bustling shipping dock, and plug a malicious USB payload, like a rubber ducky or a tiny Raspberry Pi, configured to sniff network traffic directly into an unguarded terminal.
Wow. Yeah, that's much faster.
The white box model allows the tester to identify these complex architectural and physical flaws immediately, applying their specialized skills to the deepest layers of the network without wasting time.
That reframes it perfectly. It's not about mimicking the approach of a hacker, it's about uncovering the depth of the vulnerability as quickly as possible to get your money's worth. But if a company does want to test their actual incident response, they use the black box model.
Yes, in a black box model, transparency is zero. The internal IT staff is completely unaware that an authorized test is even occurring.
They think it's a real attack.
Yes. The tester is given no diagrams, no IP ranges, absolutely no hints. The burden is entirely on the red team to map the network from the outside in, using open source intelligence and active discovery techniques.
So the primary value here isn't just finding a vulnerability, it is a literal live fire exercise for the defense team. Do the internal security operations center analysts actually notice the probing? Do their intrusion detection systems trigger?
Jeez.
If the red team manages to exfiltrate a terabyte of dummy data, does anyone in the company actually notice the massive bandwidth spike? It evaluates the human response time.
And finally, you have the gray box model, which serves as the hybrid approach. The company provides partial information, perhaps the operating systems in use or a specific subnet to target, but they withhold the comprehensive network diagrams.
Meeting in the middle.
Right. It strikes a balance, offering some of the efficiency of a white box test while retaining elements of the realistic threat simulation found in the black box test.
But how do you actually prove to a chief information security officer that you possess the skills to operate in any of these box models? I mean, you can't just walk into a corporate interview and say, trust me, I know how to bypass a firewall.
No, they won't buy that.
That introduces a whole different kind of labyrinth. The certification ecosystem. For MIS, CIS, and IT professionals, this is the roadmap for career growth, and the text lays out a very deliberate ladder.
It is a ladder that requires continuous climbing. The baseline, the absolute minimum required to prove foundational competence, is the CompTIA Security Plus certification.
Just to get your foot in the door.
Right. And this naturally implies a prerequisite understanding equivalent to the CompTIA Network Plus certification. Because you cannot defend a network if you do not understand how a router directs traffic or how a switch handles MAB addresses.
You have to know the plumbing before you can fix the leak.
Exactly. The next step up for specialized penetration testing is the CompTIA Pen Test Plus MAE, which verifies an analyst's ability to plan and scope an assessment, perform vulnerability scanning, and actually analyze the resulting data.
But then the text introduces the heavy hitters, specifically the OSCP, the Offensive Security Certified Professional.
Oh, the OSCP. It commands immense respect in the industry because it is brutally practical. It is not a multiple choice exam where you can just guess the right answer.
You can't just cram for it the night before.
Not at all. To earn the OSCP, students are dropped into a virtual lab environment containing a series of intentionally vulnerable machines. They have a strict 24-hour time limit to actively compromise these machines, escalate their privileges to root or system admin, and extract proof files.
The text mentions that OSCP candidates have to develop rudimentary buffer overflows. For those newer to the mechanics, how does a buffer overflow actually work? Like, why is demonstrating that specific skill so critical?
A buffer overflow is a foundational concept in memory corruption. Imagine an application or a program allocates a specific block of memory, a buffer, to hold a user's password, and let's say it allows for 10 characters.
Okay, a 10-character box.
Exactly. A malicious actor intentionally inputs 100 characters into that 10-character box. If the program isn't written securely to check the length of the input before processing it, those extra 90 characters don't just disappear into the ether.
Where they go?
They overflow the allocated buffer and physically overwrite the adjacent memory space in the system's RAM.
And what's sitting in that adjacent memory space?
Well, often it's the instruction pointer. That's the part of the memory that tells the computer's processor what command to execute next. If an attacker carefully crafts that overflowing data, They can overwrite the instruction pointer and redirect the computer to execute their own malicious payload, which grants them a remote command shell.
Wow, so they are hijacking the actual processing sequence of the computer.
Yes. The OSCP requires you to manually identify this flaw in a compiled application, craft the precise hexadecimal payload, and trigger the overflow yourself. It proves you understand the micromechanics of computation.
Compare that visceral, hands-on demonstration to something like the CEH, the Certified Ethical Hacker by the EC Council, which is a multiple-choice exam covering 22 different conceptual domains, or the OPST, based on the OSSTMM methodology.
Right, there are a lot of acronyms.
Yeah, it's alphabet soup. But then there's the CISSP, the Certified Information Systems Security Professional. Now, I really have to ask about the CISSP. If the OSCP is this brutal, hands-on sparring match that proves you can actually hack a system, why is the CISSP largely considered the gold standard for high-level cybersecurity careers?
It's a great question.
I mean, it focuses heavily on policies, procedures, and risk management across 10 domains. It's multiple choice. Why does the industry value the manager's certification over the technician's?
Because as you scale up in an organization, the nature of the problem changes from technical to financial and legal. A penetration tester uses an exploit to gain root access to a server.
Right, a very technical problem.
But a chief information security officer has to calculate the annualized loss expectancy of that vulnerability, secure a multi-million-dollar budget to remediate it across a massive global enterprise, and ensure the remediation complies with international data privacy laws.
Oh, that is a whole different ballgame.
Completely different. The CISSP verifies that an individual can translate technical vulnerabilities into business risk. The industry values it because a technical flaw might crash a server, but a failure in risk management and policy can result in the company facing catastrophic federal lawsuits.
Which perfectly frames the danger of the paper tiger phenomenon the text warns about.
Yes, the paper tiger.
Mm-hmm.
A paper tiger is an IT professional whose resume is loaded with multiple choice certifications, but who possesses literally zero practical ability.
They are all theory.
Right. They memorize the terminology from test prep books just long enough to pass the exam, but they lack a fundamental grasp of the complex concepts. When faced with a live, unscripted network anomaly on a Tuesday afternoon, they freeze because they only know the theory, not the application.
I always think earning a multiple-choice certification is like earning a black belt in martial arts by only memorizing the forms the cod does in the air. It looks really impressive on paper.
Sure does.
But if you have never actually sparred against a resisting opponent, the moment you are in a real fight, you are going to get knocked out. The certifications get you the interview, but continuous hands-on learning is what allows you to actually keep the job.
Precisely. And once you have cultivated those skills, you arrive at the most critical juncture for any early career professional: understanding the legal framework that dictates how and when you can actually deploy those skills. Welcome to the legal minefield.
The legal minefield. Because the laws surrounding technology are complex, they are often incredibly outdated, and they are subject to wild jurisdictional variances. The textbook outlines a strict baseline of what you cannot do, even as an ethical hacker.
This list is non-negotiable.
Right. You cannot access a computer without permission. You cannot destroy or copy data without permission. You cannot install viruses or worms. And crucially, you must not deny legitimate users access to network resources.
That last point is absolutely vital. You have to ensure your testing methodologies do not inadvertently cause a denial of service attack.
Like knocking a server offline by accident.
Yes, exactly. If your automated vulnerability scanner sends too many concurrent requests to a fragile legacy database and crashes it during peak business hours, you have caused actual quantifiable financial damage to your client. You are liable for that disruption.
This is why the cardinal rule of independent consulting is, get it in writing. A legally binding contract is your only shield. The text recommends supplementary reading for contractors, specifically Getting Started in Consulting and the Consulting Bible by Alan Weiss.
Excellent resources.
You need a contract drafted and reviewed by a qualified attorney that explicitly outlines the scope of work, the permitted IP addresses, and the allowable testing windows. Because if you step outside that scope, the laws are waiting for you, and they vary wildly by state.
They really do. The text notes that in some U.S. states, the mere possession of physical lock-picking tools is considered a crime.
Which is crazy if you are hired to do a physical security assessment.
Exactly. Physical security assessment is a legitimate aspect of a full security test. But local statutes regarding burglary tools are often written very broadly, and the digital laws are equally convoluted. Take port scanning, for example. The legal ambiguity surrounding port scanning is staggering.
Let's break down the mechanics of port scanning to understand why it's so legally gray. At its core, it's really just checking to see what services a computer has open to the internet, right?
Correct. When a computer wants to communicate over the internet using TCP, the Transmission Control Protocol, it performs what's called a three-way handshake.
Okay, how does that work?
The client sends a SYN packet, which stands for synchronize. If the server's port is open and listening, it replies with a SYN ACK packet, meaning synchronize acknowledge. Finally, the client sends an ACK packet, acknowledge, and the connection is fully established.
But an ethical hacker performing a stealth scan manipulates that normal process.
Yes. In a half-open stealth scan, the tester sends the initial SYN packet. The server replies with the SYN ACK, confirming the port is open. But then, the tester drops the connection. They never send that final ACK packet.
So they just leave the server hanging.
Right. By aborting the handshake before it completes, the tester maps the open port without the interaction ever being logged by the target's operating system because a full connection was never actually established.
So is performing that half-open stealth scan against a random corporate server illegal?
Well, the federal government generally does not view port scanning itself as a violation of the U.S. Constitution, which leaves it entirely up to individual states to regulate.
And I imagine states view it very differently.
Oh, absolutely. Some states view it as non-invasive and non-destructive. Others view it as the digital equivalent of criminal trespassing.
It's like walking down a residential street at 2 a.m. and gently jiggling the doorknob of every single house you pass. You haven't picked the lock. You haven't broken the door down. You haven't actually stolen a television. You are simply checking to see if the mechanism is engaged.
That's a perfect way to visualize it.
Right. Now, depending on the state, is that explicitly a felony? Maybe not. But if a police cruiser observes you doing it at 2 a.m., you are absolutely going to be detained, aggressively questioned, and likely charged with prowling or loitering. You are inviting immense legal scrutiny based on the ambiguity of your intent.
And even if you manage to avoid criminal prosecution, you face severe civil liabilities. Your own internet service provider has an acceptable use policy, or AUP.
That long document nobody reads.
Exactly. The textbook provides a really sobering example with the PAC-InfoNet AUP in Figure 1-3. It explicitly forbids utilizing techniques designed to disrupt networks or probe for vulnerabilities without authorization.
And the penalty isn't just them politely disconnecting your internet. The PAC-InfoNet AUP reserves the right to charge the offending user a billing rate of $125 per hour for the staff time their internal IT team spends investigating and repairing any disruption caused by your unauthorized scanning.
Which adds up incredibly fast.
Yeah. You could be a college student running an aggressive Nmap scan from your dorm room just to practice for a certification, and you end up with a civil bill for thousands of dollars.
This extends into the modern work-from-home era as well, presenting a massive, often overlooked danger for remote workers.
Oh, the VPN issue.
Yes. Many IT professionals connect to their corporate networks via a virtual private network. If an early career analyst decides to practice their ethical hacking skills on their home lab while that corporate VPN is active, their traffic is routing directly through their employer's internal infrastructure.
You are inadvertently launching a cyber attack from inside the house.
Exactly. You are literally port scanning your own company's internal servers. That will immediately trigger internal intrusion detection systems.
Oh man, that's a bad day at the office.
At best, you face a severe disciplinary hearing with HR. At worst, you are terminated for violating corporate security policy and potentially face legal action for unauthorized access to internal systems.
So we've discussed the civil penalties and the state-level ambiguities. But what happens when you cross the line at the federal level? The text provides a really comprehensive overview of federal computer crime laws. Let's group these conceptually because it is just a massive web of oversight.
There's a lot to navigate.
You have laws aimed at theft and espionage, like the No Electronic Theft Act, which basically extends criminal copyright law to digital environments. And you have the Economic Espionage Act, which protects trade secrets.
Right.
Then you have laws addressing the aftermath of a breach, like the Identity Theft and Assumption Deterrence Act, which ensures courts can provide financial restitution to victims. And of course, you have the Patriot Act, which expanded surveillance capabilities and allows victims to monitor trespassers.
But the cornerstone of all federal computer crime prosecution, the statute that casts the absolute longest shadow over this entire industry, is the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act.
The CFAA.
The CFAA, codified as Title 18, Section 1030.
The CFAA was originally enacted in 1986. To put that in perspective, that is the era of floppy disks and dial-up modems. It was reportedly heavily influenced by policymakers watching the movie War Games, where a teenager accidentally hacks into a military supercomputer.
Matthew Broderick.
Yes. So the language of the law makes it a federal crime to access a computer without authorization or to exceed authorized access.
And that phrasing, exceed authorized access, is exactly where the friction lies for modern security professionals. Because the law was written in 1986, it is incredibly dangerously broad.
Does violating a website's terms of service constitute exceeding authorized access under federal law?
For decades, security researchers operated in constant fear that discovering a vulnerability and responsibly reporting it to a company could trigger federal prosecution under the CFAA simply because they probed a system in a way the owner didn't explicitly invite.
That's terrifying for a researcher.
It is. While recent Supreme Court rulings have started to finally narrow the interpretation of what actually constitutes exceeding access, the CFAA remains a really blunt instrument with absolutely devastating penalties.
To understand the human stakes of these federal laws, the text highlights several specific case studies from 2021. And the pattern that emerges from these cases completely shatters the Hollywood stereotype of the hooded hacker in a basement. Let's look at the Kansas case.
Oh, this one is alarming. In 2021, a former employee of the Ellsworth County Rural Water District in Kansas utilized his lingering credentials to access the facility's protected computer system.
He still had his login after leaving.
Right. And once inside, he intentionally manipulated the processes regulating the cleaning and disinfecting of the public drinking water supply.
This wasn't a financial heist. This was an attempt to literally poison a community's water infrastructure.
It was an insider threat with catastrophic intent. For tampering with a protected computer and a public water system, the accused faced up to 25 years in federal prison and a $500,000 fine.
Or take the case in California that very same year. Another insider threat, this time motivated by workplace retaliation. A former employee of an IT consulting firm accessed the server of a company located in Carlsbad and systematically deleted more than 1,200 of the company's 1,500 Microsoft user accounts.
Just wipe them out.
Gone. That action effectively wiped out the digital identities of the entire workforce. The company was paralyzed, employees could not access emails, they couldn't reach collaborative documents or internal network services. The business was functionally shut down for days and required 3 months of intensive IT remediation just to stabilize.
And the consequences for that.
The perpetrator was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison and ordered to pay more than $560,000 in restitution.
The financial ruin on top of the prison sentence is just staggering. And sometimes the threat completely bypasses the digital perimeter and targets the human element directly, as we saw in the Nevada case involving Tesla.
I remember this one.
This case is a stark reminder of physical and human security vulnerabilities. A Russian national traveled all the way to Nevada and offered a $1 million face-to-face cash bribe to an employee at Tesla's electric battery plant.
$1 million in cash.
Yes. The scheme required the employee to manually introduce custom ransomware into the internal network. The malware was designed to exfiltrate proprietary data, encrypt the network, and extort the company.
They didn't even bother trying to hack the external firewall. They just tried to buy an employee.
Exactly. It highlights why security tests must evaluate human susceptibility to bribery and social engineering. Such an attack carries a federal penalty of up to 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine.
We also see the global reach of these federal laws in the Atlanta case, where a Cypriot teenager hacked into major sports and gaming websites, stole personally identifiable information from massive customer databases, and attempted to extort the companies.
And the U.S. government doesn't just let that go.
No, they do not. The United States literally extradited him from Cyprus as a teenager. He was ordered to pay nearly $600,000 in restitution and sentenced to 3 years in federal prison.
Then there's the New Jersey case, where an employee at an analytics firm stole client names and passwords with the intent to sell them. He was caught and faced a $290,000 restitution order, along with 3 years of supervised release. Just goes on and on.
And finally, the text presents a case from Florida that proves cybercrime is not always about multi-million-dollar corporate espionage or international extortion. Sometimes the systemic failures are exploited for incredibly petty reasons.
Oh, a high school case.
Yes, an assistant principal at a Florida high school utilized her administrative privileges to access a highly restricted district database. Now, this network stored confidential student information, including academic grades and really sensitive medical histories.
Protected data.
Right. And she leveraged those credentials to cast hundreds of fraudulent electronic ballots to rig the school's homecoming queen election in favor of her own daughter.
It sounds absurd, but the implications are huge.
She risked her entire professional career, faced federal fraud charges, and caused immense collateral damage to her family, all for a high school popularity contest. But from a cybersecurity perspective, this case is deeply eliminating. It is a textbook example of why the modern industry is rapidly migrating towards zero trust architecture and the principle of least privilege.
Exactly. I mean, why did an assistant principal have the system-wide privileges necessary to access medical records and alter an election database in the first place?
She didn't need it to do her job.
Right. The principle of least privilege dictates that an employee should only have the exact level of network access necessary to perform their specific job functions, and absolutely nothing more.
And zero trust takes that even further.
Oh yeah. In a zero-trust environment, you do not implicitly trust any user, regardless of their title or how long they have worked at the organization. You continuously verify every single access request. The Florida case proves that human motivation is entirely unpredictable.
You can't just hope people do the right thing.
You really can't. You cannot secure a network based on the assumption that an assistant principal will behave ethically. The architecture must restrict their access structurally.
So if we synthesize all of these cases, from the Kansas water plant to the Florida high school, the undeniable conclusion is that the greatest threat to an organization is rarely the unknown, hooded hacker probing the firewall from across the globe.
No, it's usually the person sitting a few desks over.
It is the insider. It is the former contractor with lingering administrative credentials. It is the current employee facing financial hardship who is offered a bribe in a parking lot. They possess the skills, the knowledge, or the access of a penetration tester, but they lack the ethical constraints.
Which brings us full circle to the core thesis of Chapter 1, and really the foundational message for Dr. Schuessler's students and any young professional entering this field. To excel as an ethical hacker, you must cultivate the exact same technical capabilities, the exact same creative mindset, and the same relentless persistence as a malicious threat actor.
You have to think exactly like them.
Yes. You must deeply understand how memory allocation works to craft a buffer overflow. You must understand the mechanics of the TCP handshake to map a network silently. You have to know how to tear the architecture completely apart. But your career, your personal freedom, and your financial future hinge entirely on your rigid adherence to professional ethics and the strict constraints of a legal contract.
That is the ultimate takeaway here. Let's tie it all back to the scenario we opened with. The glowing monitors in the darkroom at 2:00 a.m. The successful extraction of encrypted data. The contract is the singular, vital document that dictates whether you are conducting a highly paid security assessment or committing a federal crime under the CFAA.
It's all about permission.
Without that explicit, documented authorization, you are just a criminal waiting for the authorities to knock on your door.
It is a profound responsibility. I mean, the tech sector is literally handing you the keys to the digital kingdom. You are expected to guard those keys, to stress test the locks, and to never, under any circumstances, abuse that trust.
Absolutely. And with that, we have thoroughly mapped the foundational concepts of Chapter 1. If you found value in this deep dive, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. And again, check the description below for resources to help you educate yourself and continuously learn in this incredibly fast-paced field.
Because continuous hands-on learning is really the only sustainable strategy for survival in cybersecurity.
Without a doubt. And if you are hungry for more insights right now, I highly encourage you to explore the channel's other offerings. We have a fantastic digital forensics deep dive series that examines the intricate processes of what happens after a breach occurs, and a network and system security deep dive series that explores the defensive architectures we touched on today in even greater detail.
Both are just excellent resources for building a robust, well-rounded foundation in MIS or IT.
They really are. Be sure to join us next week as we move into Chapter 2 of our current text, TCP/IP Concepts Review. We're going to get under the hood and dissect the actual protocols that make global communication and network vulnerabilities possible.
It will be highly technical, but it is essential knowledge for anyone looking to move beyond the automated tools.
Before we go, I want to leave you with a final reflective question tied to today's discussion. Think about your own digital footprint right now, today. Where is the line between curiosity and intrusion in your own daily tech habits? When does casually checking an open digital door cross the line into jiggling the handle? Master the attack, fortify the defense. Until next time, keep your hands on the keys and your network secure.